It was the kind of morning New York wore like a warning, the sky smeared in bruised shades of gray, the air heavy with rain that slapped against the 37 floors of Sterling International's glass tower like impatient fingers demanding entry, and inside its boardroom, where marble floors gleamed beneath the weight of wealth and a mahogany table stretched like a runway for power, fear was already coiled tight in every breath, because the man they had been told would arrive next week had just walked in without warning. Kenjiro Takeda, the Japanese billionaire known in both Wall Street corridors and Tokyo high-rises as the Dragon of Deals, a man whose voice could sink stock prices and whose stare could make CEOs sweat through 3 layers of Italian wool, and he was already fuming, his sharp black eyes slicing through the room, his words coming rapid and razor-sharp in Japanese, each syllable striking like a blade against the air. But here was the problem. The 15 people seated at that table, each worth more in salary than most people saw in a decade, each clutching MBAs from Harvard, Oxford, or Munich, didn't understand a single word, and the translator they had arranged was nowhere to be seen, leaving nothing but a wall of incomprehension between the dragon and his prey, and as his tone grew louder, faster, more cutting, they shifted in their seats, sweat prickling at the backs of necks, because even without knowing the language they understood the universal grammar of fury, and every gesture of his hand toward the charts and contracts spread out before him was a verdict they couldn't read but could feel sinking their futures, until, in the corner, almost hidden by the polished frame of the door, someone moved. A slim figure in a plain black maid's uniform, her posture impeccable, her hands folded lightly in front of her, Maria, the woman they all knew only as the one who refilled their coffee, straightened their chairs, and never said more than a polite good morning in her soft accent, and now, to their shock, she spoke, not in English, not in halting phrases, but in perfect, fluid Japanese, her tone calm but commanding, matching Kenjiro's speed and precision syllable for syllable, her voice weaving explanations into the air as naturally as if she had been born to this language, and in an instant the room froze, not just because they could now understand what was happening through her translations, but because Kenjiro Takeda himself had stopped mid-sentence, his gaze narrowing on her not with anger now but with something else, something more dangerous. Recognition, and in that heavy silence she went on, answering his accusations, dismantling misunderstandings, her tone neither submissive nor confrontational, but balanced with the exact measure of respect and authority that only someone deeply familiar with Japanese business culture could strike, and when she paused, waiting for his response, he asked a question that made the air tighten even further. "Where did you learn to speak like that?" And though her answer was steady, Kyoto, a father who was once a translator for diplomats, nights falling asleep to the rhythm of 2 languages. It carried an undertone no one could quite name, something wrapped in memory and loss, and when he asked for her father's name, the shift was immediate, a flicker of something raw in his expression before his jaw tightened, because the name she gave belonged to the man who had once saved his life during a tense negotiation decades ago, a night when an insult mistranslated could have turned an already volatile meeting into violence, and though her father had asked for nothing in return, Kenjiro had never forgotten the calm eyes of the man who had defused a room full of egos and weapons with nothing but words, and now, here was his daughter, standing in the quiet power of that legacy, wearing the uniform of someone invisible in this building, but holding in her voice the key to controlling the chaos, and the executives, who had moments ago been silently calculating how far their resumes would take them if this meeting collapsed, now sat watching the kind of negotiation they had read about in case studies but never seen in motion, because Kenjiro's tone had shifted from fire to steel, sharp but measured, and Maria matched him, her responses weaving a bridge between his demands and their defenses, and with every exchange it became clearer she wasn't just translating, she was negotiating, guiding the conversation away from cliffs and toward deals, slipping in concessions they hadn't dared propose, extracting agreements they didn't think were possible, and yet she never once drew attention to herself, never once looked at the executives as if expecting thanks, and that, perhaps, was why Kenjiro respected her in a way he respected few, but respect was not the same as trust, and as the rain outside intensified, streaking the glass in restless rivers, he leaned forward slightly, his eyes never leaving hers, and asked the question that would tilt the room on its axis, "Why are you here?" The executives glanced at each other, unsure whether he meant here in this meeting or here in this life, but Maria seemed to understand instantly, because her answer, though delivered in Japanese, carried in its rhythm the weight of truth. She was here because debts and loyalties had long shadows, because sometimes the only way to protect the people you love is to disappear into a role the world overlooks, and in that moment it was not clear whether she was speaking to him or to herself. But whatever passed between them and those words made Kenjiro Takeda sit back slowly, the faintest trace of something unreadable in his expression, and as the meeting drew to its unexpected conclusion, with deals struck, contracts amended, and the crisis averted, the executives were left with the uncomfortable sense that the real negotiation had not been about stocks or mergers at all, but about something older, something personal, and when Kenjiro finally stood to leave, he paused beside Maria, speaking a sentence in Japanese too low for the others to hear, But whatever it was made her eyes widen just slightly before she inclined her head, and then he was gone, leaving behind a silence almost as heavy as his arrival, and in that silence one of the braver executives asked her, in English, what he had said, and her answer was simple enough to be disarming. He said the debt is repaid.